Hey everyone, I am in the bathroom and what I'm going to be doing today is installing some backerboard material around the window. So stay tuned. So if you're new to the channel, just want to welcome you here and hopefully you'll consider subscribing if you like what you see. Also, check out DIY Apprentice on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I post lots of pictures and videos on those platforms before I post anything on YouTube. And occasionally I'll post things on those platforms I don't post on YouTube. Also, check out the website at DIYapprentice.com. And don't forget to hit the like button if you like this video. So I made the boneheaded mistake of giving away all the DensShield that I had left over, thinking I was all finished. No problem. Everything's all done. Clear out my garage. It'll all be great. Well, what happened was actually I had not put anything around the window, so I had to go to the store, buy some Durock because I couldn't get DensShield during the day when I'm working, and also because DensShield is a little more expensive. I didn't need that much of it anyway, so I figured I'd just go the cheaper route and buy some Durock. So that's what we're going to be installing today, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Here's the finished product with the backerboard all installed, and we're going to start with the top piece first, then we'll do the two sides, and lastly the sill. Now the bottom piece for the sill is going to be a special case, as we'll discuss more in depth later, to make sure water doesn't pool on the sill. Alright, so I've already cut the Durock for the window. I don't like the way it turned out though because I use a utility knife. So I'm going to use my VersaCut with a diamond blade. See right there? Nice and sharp. This is brand new. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut this piece off, this big board, so I can have a smaller piece to work with, and then I can cut the small pieces to go around the window. So what I've done here, I've got my sawhorses set up. I've got a block of wood under here. I've got my straight edge, and then I've got a clamp to hold that down. Block of wood here to hold this side up. And then I just did the same thing on the other end here too. So the VersaCut, as you can see, I've got a hose hooked up to it. So they don't usually ship these with a hose, so what I did is I went to the hardware store and found a dishwasher hose. So that fits over the vacuum port. So a little hokey, but it seems to work okay. I just have to make sure it stays on tight enough there. And then I've got that connected to my vacuum so that this dust doesn't kick up everywhere, hopefully. I've also got an N95 mask on because this dust is pretty bad, so I wouldn't want to breathe this. I also have some gloves on to protect my hands, and I've got some goggles on to protect my eyes. Alright, so there we go. I got that cut. It's nice and straight like that. Okay, so that seemed to go pretty well. What I'm going to do now is actually cut these pieces down to the width we're going to use in the bathroom. The width around the window is uniform at about 2 15/16. I'm going to go about 2 7/8 just to give myself a little bit of wiggle room just in case it doesn't fit correctly. So there is our first piece. Alright, so I've got all the pieces cut to the proper width. I'm going to cut them down to their lengths now. So this is the top piece I'm going to start with. And the length on that is 28 13/16. I'm going to cut it down to about 28 11/16 to give myself a little bit of space to get it in that cavity. So, got my square here. VersaCut. Go ahead and set this on. I'm going to cut this end off since it's tapered. Alright, so that piece is good. So that's our top piece. This is the side that goes out. So the tile is going to be stuck to this side. So this is the rougher side. That's the smooth side. So this side is used for thin set. The other side's used for mastic. I cut with this side exposed, sticking up. So it would chip out in the back instead of the front. Alright, so we've got our top piece ready to go in. And what I've done is also measured from the window to the 2x material from the header that's sticking out. I should have installed a nailer when I installed the window. That would have dropped the window down about 1.5 inches, which would have been fine. I just didn't think that all the way through. So I only have one attachment point basically, instead of having a whole piece of 2x material that I could attach this board to. So what I've done is measured from the window to the center of that 2x material in the header, which is about right there. Do that on both ends. Then I'll just draw a line, and I'm going to drill some holes so I can attach this to the header. So I'm going to pre-drill this just using a regular drill bit, probably about a 1/8 inch hole. So here's the screws I'm going to install. These are cement board screws. These are water resistant. So I'm probably going to put in extra screws because of the fact that I only have one row for attaching this to the header. So that screw's spacing typically is 8 inches on center. I'm going to probably go about 6 inches on center. Alright, that's all ready to go in. Alright, so I've got the cement board nice and flush with the edge. I've got a couple clamps to hold this up for me here. So I'm using them in the spreader position. And I'm going to start this screw in. So I'm being really careful so I don't drive these screws too deep. So that's one reason why I'm kind of, playing with the trigger a little bit. Pull this out now. Yeah, there's a little bit of flex in the center here. I'm going to put one more screw here and probably one here. See how that does. Other than that, it looks pretty good. Alright, so I've got the left side piece ready to go in. Now on this one I've drawn 2 lines. I've got some shims out in this area, so I wanted to be careful and make sure I don't put any screws in this area. So I've got 2 lines. I'm going to stagger the screws just to kind of firm this up. So that should look okay. Alright, so I've got this side piece ready to go in. I've got 2 clamps in tandem, just kind of pushing against each other to keep this tied up against the wall here. And I'm going to go ahead and sink this screw. This is nice and flush. So I check it again. Looks really good. So go ahead and put this first screw in. So I'm going to put a screw up here now, and then I should be able to probably put one more down here and then pull these clamps out of the way. Alright, and one last screw up here. Alright, so this side is done. I'm going to move to the other side now. Alright, so I installed the right side, which is identical to the left side. So we're going to move ahead and finish the installation. Alright, so we're going to tackle the window sill next. This is going to be a very crucial and important area for us to make sure we get right. It's because, as I've talked about, I almost want to imagine that when I waterproof everything in here, that there's not going to be any tile in here. And the tile is just basically going to be dressing on top of this backer board material. So with that in mind, we want to make sure we slope the sill into the tub area, because if we don't do that beforehand, and say for example we were just to go ahead and put the cement board in nice and flat and then go ahead and build up this area with some thin set when we put our tile in, we could have water pooling in this area if there's ever something that happens to the tile, maybe something happens to the thin set or the grout cracks or something. There's a chance we can get water in this area. So with that in mind, like I said, I'm going to slope this. I'm going to pre-slope this sill instead of sloping it afterwards when I'm installing the tile. So we'll do that next. Now, the typical slope that I've seen out there that's mentioned is 1/4 inch per foot. And you've probably heard that number before. We were talking about plumbing and sloping the plumbing drain lines 1/4 inch per foot. So that's kind of applies to this area too. So at least 1/4 inch per foot slope. So I've got about 3 inches here, so 12 divided by 3 is 4, so you take your 1/4 inch, divide that by 4, you get 1/16 of an inch. So a couple things you can do, you can actually buy beveled siding to do that. The only problem with beveled siding is that it has a little bit more of a slope than our 1/4 inch per foot. So that's something at least you'll get some sort of a slope if you want to use beveled siding. Another thing you can do is you can use I've seen people use like plastic shims back here. They build up the area under the cement board with some thin set, and that raises the cement board up, and then they waterproof on top of that. Alright, so to check slope in this area, I probably would use something like this off by a combination square. Check your level first, check and see where it is, and then just go ahead and tilt it. And right there, that looks pretty good. That's about 1/8 of an inch. So that's what I'm going to use. I think 1/8 of an inch actually is a good number to use. In general, that gives you about 1/2 inch per foot slope on the back of the sill here. Alright, so since I don't have any beveled siding that is at the right angle that I need, I'm going to try doing it with a 2x4. So the first thing is I have to make sure this piece of wood is nice and straight. So I usually sight down the wood at the store when I'm buying, especially if I'm building a wall, putting in wall studs. This one looks pretty straight. The other thing I want to do is I want to cut the edge off because we're going to have to pass this wood later on through the table saw like this. And if I'm passing it through the table saw and it starts to teeter on this edge, that's going to throw us off a little bit. Alright, so it looks like we have a knot right there. That could be problematic, so we may have to do this in 2 separate pieces. We're going to try it in 1 piece first, see how it goes. This cut works for sills up to about 3 inches when using a 10-inch blade on my table saw. And to calculate the angle, I'm just repeating what I did with this wall stud I corrected in the shower backer board installation video. And also I'll put a link to that video if you want to check it out. But basically the simple equation looks like this. We take our 1/8 inch over the 2.5 inch sill depth and convert that to a pitch, which is in units of 12. So X in this case works out to about 0.6. We then throw that number into a pitch to angle calculator like the one I use on blocklayer.com, and we get 2.86 degrees as our angle. Alright, so I'm going to set my table saw blade to around 3 degrees. That's the angle we calculated using the block layer tool. I'll go a little less than 3 degrees here. Right there is good. Lock that in place. Alright. So our blade is angled this way. So I've got the saw blade pretty high here. So I need to at least cut about 2.5 inches. That's the depth of my what I need on the sill. So it's pretty close. I say I've probably got about 3/4 of an inch left over here. So definitely I'm going to be using the push stick for this. Also I'm lining up the wood so that it's just a hair over the blade, to the right of the blade, just a hair. There's our piece right there on this side, and then also on this side. It looks like it's the same height all the way through. So all I have to do now is just cut this down, and that should be our piece that we're going to put on the back of the sill. Alright, so I've corrected the table saw blade back to 0, and I've also measured this out. It's about 2 7/16 is about where I want it. see it's a little ragged in here because I got the blade a little too close to the edge of the board. Overall though, it doesn't look too bad. That's about what we wanted. So I actually made a couple more attempts at cutting the shim on the table saw, and I replaced this shim with one that was more cleanly cut to achieve a uniform slope. Alright, so here's the piece of wood we cut right there. See, it's got the bevel. So I'm going to put this in like that. Slide that in. Like so. I think that's back far enough. Here's our board that we cut. So rough side out. Slide that in. Straight back. So I was going to attach the shim using some brad nails, but I think I'm just going to drive some screws to the cement board and secure it that way. I'll have to pre-drill, of course, so I don't split this shim underneath, but I think that should be good. Alright, I'm going to start putting in some screws up here, and I have to remember that there are some shims in the front, so I want to stay away from probably about the last, I would say, almost inch up here, because we got the backer board, which is ½ inch, and then we've got our shims, which are somewhere around probably about 1/4 of an inch. I also have to be cognizant of where the studs are here too. So, a lot to consider. Alright, so there you have it. There's a backer board installation around the window. Pretty easy, and working with the Durock actually was not bad at all. I thought it was going to be a little bit harder. I thought I was going to have to worry about the Durock crumbling, but it actually held together pretty well. And using a power tool, that is definitely a plus. That's something that I will probably do going forward if I ever have to work with Durock again, is to pull out my VersaCut in this case and just cut nice straight cuts and not try to use something like a utility knife that's really going to cause problems on the edges. The other thing is, as you saw, getting that sill slope correctly, that's a very important step. That's something I read a lot about, did a lot of research on that. And pre-sloping it as opposed to sloping it with thin set afterwards is definitely a way to go. Just to make sure that you have all the water draining into the tub area and don't have to worry about any sort of cracks in your grout or any thin set problems allowing water to pool up on that sill. So hopefully this information was helpful, and thanks for watching. See links in the description below. Comment, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to check us out on social media. And thanks for watching.